Hello and welcome to The Jam here on DZRJ Radio, the voice of the Philippines on 810 AM on your radio dial. My name is Eric LeCain and it is Sunday night, 9 o'clock, and we're here talking about the news stories that have been going on around the world this week, things that we may have found interesting that we heard about, but we're going to sit here tonight and try to analyze some of them. Now, this past week, there was a hearing to discuss the impeachment proceedings against President Duterte. This was based on his role in the state-sponsored killings and his involvement in the Davao Death Squad and his inaction to uphold the country's sovereign rights over the Philippine Sea. Well, in no time at all, the committee dismissed the two impeachment complaints lodged against the president for insufficiency in substance. So for now, there will be no impeachment for President Duterte. Most of the House of Representatives are very loyal to the president, and he has a very high 67% approval rating, in some polls even higher. It's very hard to impeach a president that most people love, no matter what he allegedly does. Bill Clinton was impeached in the United States because of lying about an affair with an intern. But the problem was that people loved him, and his popularity actually went up after the impeachment. Duterte has gone as far as publicly admitting to killing people, but the public thinks he's doing a good job. According to the polls, people actually feel safer with President Duterte in office. But this doesn't seem to be the case for his counterpart in the United States, where things are not going so easy. This week, the US media is throwing out words like obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and what is now known as the I word, impeachment. But unlike President Duterte, Trump does not enjoy the full support of his people. And even the representatives supporting him in Congress are hard-pressed to give interviews these days. After the latest scandal, reporters can't even get any Republican to do interviews. Even Fox News is having a hard time getting guests to come on the show. Trump this week gave a commencement speech in which he said, "Never in history of politics has anyone ever been treated so unfairly." Of course, I guess Trump never met Nelson Mandela or Abraham Lincoln. Some are saying the biggest reason Trump is in so much trouble now is because of one person, his biggest enemy, the one who has caused him more trouble than anyone. That person is Donald Trump. But let's take a look at what's happened so far. It's absolutely mind-boggling, the amount of stories coming out of the US this week, usually on sites like CNN and BBC. There are 6 or 7 major stories. One of them will be about US politics. But it's not unusual the past few days that all the stories will be about the chaos that's happening in the United States White House. Let's just recap what has happened so far, because there are just so many parts to this story. It's hard to keep up or keep it all straight. Going back to the first week of May, the FBI director testified that he thinks he did the right thing in making the Hillary Clinton investigation public just days before the election. However, it made him nauseous to think that he may have been the one to inevitably get Trump elected. He said the FBI has an ongoing investigation into the Trump campaign's involvement in the Russian hacking scandal, and this includes Michael Flynn, the former national security director, and Paul Manafort, the head of the Trump campaign. These guys we have talked about quite extensively here on The Jam. In that same hearing, the former Attorney General Sally Yates, who Trump later fired, testified that she warned Trump 3 times that Michael Flynn, the U.S. security advisor, was colluding with the Russians. Also, it came out that President Obama told Trump not to hire this guy. But according to Trump's spokesman, Trump thought Obama was joking. Trump eventually was forced to fire him, but it was 18 days after they told him that they had intercepted calls with the Russians and Flynn. Now, the next day, Comey testified, the day after this, that Comey had testified that he was investigating the collusion of the Trump campaign and the Russians, he was fired by the president. Trump gave the reason that it was because of a recommendation of the Attorney General, the same guy who lied to Congress about meeting the Russian ambassador, and the Deputy Attorney General, who said it was because of how he handled the Clinton email scandal, which of course made very little to no sense because Trump had praised Comey about it before. But later the deputy claimed that he said that Trump actually asked him to come up with a reason, and that's all he could think of. Well, the next day, Trump met with, if you can believe this, the Russian foreign minister and the Russian ambassador. This is the same one that met with Michael Flynn and the Attorney General, who both had lied about that. Was the meeting where Trump was bragging to the Russians about how great his secret intel was that he was getting, and then he proceeded to give the Russians the secret intel. The next day, Trump does an interview with NBC News' Lester Holt, in which Trump claims he fired the FBI director, on his own accord, and that it had nothing to do with the recommendations he got. He also said he wasn't happy with the way the FBI director was handling the Russian investigation. And he said no one liked the FBI director. Then, of course, the acting FBI director said that is not true, that everyone liked Comey, and that many people were mad that he was fired. Now, the next day, Trump says that the story about his campaign to collude with the Russian government was completely fabricated by the Democrats, mostly because they lost the election. Then he said, and this is where it gets kind of crazy, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of the conversations that he had with him, Trump, before he starts leaking to the press. The press, of course, said, well, what tapes? To which the White House and the president refused to answer. Many have now speculated that this may fall along the same lines as the Obama bugging his phones issue. Report came out that the intel that Trump accidentally gave to the Russians was originally given by the Israelis, who did not want it in the hands of the Russians. Trump's first trip out of the country, which is going on right now, has him scheduled to meet with Israel. This has made for what might be a very extremely awkward situation. The next day, a report comes out citing a memo written by Comey that Trump asked Comey to halt the investigation into Michael Flynn and the Russians, asking him to let this one go. Turns out that Comey kept notes on everything, especially inappropriate conversations with presidents. The Deputy Attorney General shows up here again. That was originally thrown under the bus by Trump after he used him as an excuse for firing the FBI director. Well, it turns out that that guy actually drives the bus and has appointed a special prosecutor to the case of the Russian collusion. Then the transcripts were released of what Trump said to the Russians during his meeting, which was set up by Vladimir Putin. The U.S. press was not allowed into that meeting. However, the Russian press was, and there were transcripts. It seems Trump bragged to the Russians that the FBI director handling the investigation into the Russians hacking into the election had just been fired. Trump said, "I fired the head of the FBI. He was crazy, a real nut job. I faced a great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off." So now Trump is telling the Russians to relax. He has gotten rid of the FBI guy, and this stupid Russian investigation is over. Also, a new report has just resurfaced that previously the Russians were bragging about how they cultivated a strong relationship with Michael Flynn. They believed they could use him to influence Donald Trump and his team. Also, it turns out Flynn accepted $530,000 in a lobbying deal with the Turkish government that he forgot to tell anyone about. It also came out that he blocked a U.S. military plan that was opposed by Turkey. Flynn, of course, had not registered as a foreign agent, disclosing that he was indeed working for Turkey. Now, it also seems, it just keeps coming and coming. There were 18 previous undisclosed contacts that had been uncovered between the Russian campaign, by the Trump campaign, and the Russian contacts. These interactions are now part of the record being reviewed by the FBI and congressional investigators. These calls took place at the same time the hackers engaged in what is now known as the Kremlin's campaign to discredit the U.S. election and influence the outcome in Trump's favor. So like I said before, what does this all mean now? Well, like I said, people are using terms like obstruction of justice, abuse of power, impeachment. I was watching TV the other day and someone said, if Trump gets impeached, his presidency will be shorter than the NBA playoffs. These are not normal times these days. The Washington Post even reported that the FBI is now looking into whether any financial crimes were committed by people close to the president. And there's a top official in the White House who's now being considered a person of interest in this criminal investigation. And who do you think this is? It's not Michael Flynn. He's no longer a White House official. Is it Steve Bannon, the white supremacist senior policy advisor? Is it Ivanka Trump, the sassy, sexy daughter? Is it Sean Spicer, the press secretary who's been hiding in the bushes from reporters? Or is it Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, the one with all the shady deals and the undisclosed dealings with the Russians? It's becoming a real whodunit. This is Eric McCain here on The Jam on DZRJ Radio, the voice of the Philippines. We're talking about stories going on around the world, and now we are really focusing on this crazy case.